Hello and welcome to this edition of Access Asia. Coming up, from the boardroom to the classroom, every year 50,000 Africans earn scholarships to study in China, boosting Sino-African ties. And it's a world's dirty problem. Poor sanitation threatens billions of people. Find out what India is doing to clean up its act. And the Great Ape family just got bigger. A group that already includes humans and chimps can now welcome a new species of orangutan discovered in Indonesia. But first, we often hear about China's influence in Africa, but a bit less the other way around. This year, tens of thousands of young Africans received scholarships offers to study in China, and Beijing's University of Business and Economics recently held its first ever job fair for African students.
Here at the University of Business and Economics in Beijing, these African students are taking a course of Tai Chi. They have just arrived in China, hailing from Togo, the Ivory Coast, and South Sudan.
Okay, I'm very tall. Okay. No.
At the top of their agenda is learning Mandarin. This year, 50,000 young Africans received a scholarship from the Chinese state. In over 10 years, the number has increased by 20 times. No surprise when for many of these students, the appeal was easy to see.
It wasn't actually difficult because if you look at the requirements they wanted, they were actually not so much. And unlike other institutions or other countries.
Oscorn already speaks very good Mandarin, having been here now for over 2 years. China's scholarship for these students amounts to €430 per month. Here, the canteen and lodgings are free, which only helps to give the impression of a strong local economy.
I did not expect to come to China, but what I've seen amazed me. I see a country that has invested a lot into research, which has invested a lot into the development of new technology. What the Chinese have been capable of doing for some years, one day we might be able to do the same thing.
Un jour, nous serons en mesure aussi de faire la même chose.
China's goal is exactly that, to export their model to Africa. It is why they are financing future African leaders, and state television broadcasts the graduation ceremonies with pride. The university's head of faculty has also spoken about the benefits of choosing China over France.
In comparison with France, China doesn't have problems with security and it's less expensive here.
China is already Africa's #1 commercial partner, and these young students are only likely to further enforce this privileged link.
I'm not accustomed to any other country, so when I'm ready, I will likely choose to work with the Chinese.
However, none of these students were willing to admit on camera if they had experienced problems with racism while integrating into Chinese society. A question, perhaps, of not wanting to anger the Beijing authorities.
The household toilet is an item that many of us may take for granted, though more than 4 billion people live without one. The United Nations has designated November 19th as World Toilet Day to raise awareness and help stop the spread of deadly diseases. In our next report, we go to India, where a €30 billion campaign has been launched to make sure every Indian has access to a toilet by 2019.
In this neighborhood of New Delhi, toilets are a rarity. Just a few weeks ago, a spanking new toilet complex was inaugurated here. The residents are delighted. They hope it will end open defecation in their area.
We have all the facilities here. These toilets have an adequate water supply.
Since 2014, the Indian government has been on a toilet building spree. The Clean India campaign is the pet project of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a mission to make sanitation accessible to 1.25 billion people. Even Bollywood has jumped on the sanitation bandwagon. Toilet, a Love Story, released earlier this year, depicts the struggle to build a toilet in a backward village. The fictional film addresses a very real problem, that of women who refuse to use public toilets at night out of fear for their safety. the Prime Minister's home state of Gujarat, was declared open defecation-free 3 years after his Clean India campaign began.
So as on today, our access is 100%. But utilization, as I have said, it's a social transformation. They might not be using toilet, but that's a very, very small percentage of the population.
The Clean India mission is estimated to cost 30 billion euros, but critics question the success of the campaign. A majority of the new toilets have become unusable over time. Maintenance and access to water also remains a huge challenge.
See how terrible the toilets are? It's dirty. No cleaning has been done for ages. The pipes and the lights are broken. How do we use these? How do we use toilets which are in this condition?
For now, Jitu and others like him have to go back to the open fields.
I'm going over there. If the toilets were any good, it would be much simpler. We wouldn't have to go so far.
Around 564 million Indians still defecate in the open. The government's target of a clean India by 2019 seems a far-fetched dream.
For the first time in almost a century, the family of great apes has a new member. Scientists have confirmed a new species of orangutan in northern Sumatra, this after researching the animals for 20 years. There are already concerns whether it will survive as its natural habitat is under threat. Erin Ogunki has more.
Hair, a small head, and a particularly high-pitched cry. Scientists have identified a new species of orangutan, which they have called tapanuli. It's the first new great ape species to be discovered since 1929. The tapanuli orangutan is native to the Batang Toru region of northern Sumatra in Indonesia. Until now, scientists thought the tapanuli, long known to the local population, belonged to the Bornean species. But when biologists compared their tooth and skull sizes, they found considerable differences.
We helped collect some samples from the field in various different places. They were analysed, and it showed that the ones in the Batang Toru were actually quite different. So then we thought, well, if they're different genetically, maybe they're different morphologically and behaviourally as well.
Tapanuli orangutans also consume variations of leaves and fruit that other species do not eat. The newly discovered orangutan is the most endangered in the world. With no more than 800 of them left in the wild, scientists warn that the species could disappear in just 10 years, one of the many victims of deforestation and poaching in Indonesia.
China is one of the world's biggest producers and exporters of bee products, but even there, the effects of the declining bee population are noticeable. In some areas, people have replaced the insects and taken to pollinating flowers by hand.
In this mountainous region of China at this time of year, all the cherry trees are in bloom. In the orchard, villagers are as busy as bees. And never a truer word, as these women must climb the trees and using feather dusters pollinate the flowers.
Pollination by hand works really well. I have to look after hundreds of trees.
During the pollination season here, the bee women, as they are known, work 12 hours a day for 2 weeks.
I enjoy pollinating the flowers. It helps them to bear bigger and better fruits. It's difficult for the fruit to grow without artificial pollination, and here we don't use pesticides, so it's more natural.
Before pollinating the cherry blossom, however, they must harvest pollen from the flowers of other trees. With toothbrushes, the women extract the pollen from these male flowers to pollinate the female flowers. But they must work very quickly so that it retains its fertility.
First, I'm scraping it with this brush to extract the pollen. Then we leave it to dry under a light, and then finally we put it on the flowers.
For the manager of this 20-hectare orchard, pollinization by hand is more expensive, but is ultimately an effective alternative in the face of declining bee population.
Well, there's a rap battle, the dance battle, but have you ever heard of the art battle? This is an international competition hosted in the Filipino capital of Manila. A dozen people painting for 20 minutes while behind them, the audience circles, observes, and ultimately votes for a winner. That honor bestowed upon digital illustrator Nico. He painted not one but two portraits of his girlfriend. He said being watched made his creative juices flow.
The time pressure is really fun because the rapid heartbeat it causes is a pleasure. It flows with my passion. The watching audience only motivates me. Knowing that someone is watching me from behind makes me want to paint better.
And speaking of painting, the new Miss World is an avid painter herself, as well as a classical dancer and a medical student. India's Manushi Chilar was crowned Miss World in the beauty pageant hosted by China. She hopes to one day open a chain of non-profit hospitals in rural India. And this marks the 6th time an Indian contestant won the crown, tying the country with Venezuela for the most victories ever. We leave you with these images. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching and see you again next time.
Middle East Matters, presented by Sanam Chantier.
Keep up to date on the latest from the Middle East. We bring you political, economic, and cultural events from the region in this weekly Middle Eastern program.
Middle East Matters on France 24 and France24.com.